The moment my expensive fountain pen glided across the thick stack of closing documents, resting on the long oak table of that hushed, luxurious Seattle real estate office, I felt absolutely nothing. There was pin-drop silence in the room, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of an antique pendulum clock on the wall and the scratching of my pen against the paper. My hands weren't trembling. My heart wasn't racing. I didn't feel that sinking void people usually experience when they lose their forever home. My pen moved across those pages with the same clinical precision I used for my daily accounting spreadsheets, perfectly steady, calculated, and devoid of hesitation. Sitting across from me, the closing attorney, a veteran with 20 years in the business, was peering over his glasses with a deeply puzzled expression. He was desperately searching my face for a flicker of grief, regret, or defeat. After all, a woman willingly selling her $2.5 million dream home to a faceless corporate firm ought to be in tears, or at least a little emotional. But my face was a mask of stone. I was simply replaying a memory from exactly 27 days ago, the night my husband David and his mother Martha had unceremoniously kicked me out of that very house. They genuinely believed they had stripped me of my home, my pride, my years of hard work, and my life savings all in one fell swoop. They were celebrating my ruin. What they didn't realize, as they popped champagne under my roof, was who actually held the legal rights to the ground they were standing on, and the devastating trap I was silently setting for them. People often ask me how a marriage deteriorates to the point where your own home feels like a stranger's house, and the person you promised your life to becomes your worst enemy. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens in layers, like plaster slowly peeling away from a grand old building. I am a property investor and a certified public accountant. Growing up in a modest family in Ohio, I learned the value of a dollar and the sheer grit required to earn it from a very young age. When I met David, I was just 24. I was the girl who had put herself through college working 2 jobs, the girl who stayed up all night analyzing market trends, and who was already enjoying the early, highly successful stages of a career in an expensive city like Seattle. Exactly 2 years before our wedding, I bought that gorgeous house through my own private LLC. It wasn't just a house, it was the trophy of my relentless hustle. I paid the hefty mortgage, the crippling property taxes, the insurance, and even paid to landscape every single flower in that garden with my own hard-earned money. David was the polar opposite. He worked a mediocre job in marketing, but his biggest weakness wasn't his career or his finances. It was his mother. He was the kind of man who couldn't make a single life-altering decision without his mommy's permission. My mother-in-law, Martha, despised my fierce independence. In her eyes, the ideal daughter-in-law was a submissive homemaker who danced to her tune, abandoned her career to keep house, and worshipped the ground her son walked on, no matter how hollow he was on the inside. My demanding career, my financial freedom, and my ability to call my own shots threatened her to her core. I still clearly remember our first Thanksgiving dinner as a married couple. I had spent the entire day slaving away in the kitchen to prepare a flawless feast. At the dining table, Martha swirled the wine in her glass, looked me dead in the eye, and turned to David. David, you honestly deserve a medal for putting up with a woman who loves her laptop more than her family. She treats this house like a hotel. Standing at the kitchen doorway, I listened in stunned silence. I waited for David to defend me. I waited for him to remind his mother that my hard work was the very reason this house ran so beautifully. But, true to form, he just stared blankly at his plate. He didn't shut her down. He didn't stand up for my dignity. That was the moment a massive, unbridgeable rift opened between us. I thought maybe he genuinely felt neglected because of my work. Being a devoted wife, I bent over backwards to fix it. I started spending more time at home, canceled crucial business meetings, and learned to cook his favorite Italian dishes. I thought a little quality time would prove my love. Instead, the distance between us only widened. He started working suspiciously late. He always had a watertight excuse: an emergency project, a dinner with a major client, a sudden deadline. I wanted to believe him. But then, the red flags started waving. Sometimes his coats carried the faint, sweet scent of cheap floral and vanilla perfume, a fragrance I wouldn't be caught dead wearing. Once, I found a faint smudge of makeup on his shirt collar. When I confronted him, he completely flipped the script. He gaslit me, claiming I was acting crazy, paranoid from work stress, and that he was just out with colleagues. A woman's intuition is a terrifyingly accurate compass. Our gut screams at us when something is wrong, but our brain refuses to process the bitter truth until it slaps us squarely in the face. I was living in denial, convincing myself that I was the problem. Then came that freezing, stormy November evening that altered the course of my life forever. I was returning from an exhausting, grueling business trip to Chicago. Thanks to atrocious weather, my flight was delayed by 3 hours. The wind was howling, and Seattle's icy, driving rain felt like needles against my face. I was physically and mentally drained. Dragging my heavy suitcase, my only comforting thought was getting inside my warm, beautiful home, brewing a hot coffee, and collapsing into my plush bed. But when I shoved my key into the front door lock, it wouldn't budge. I thought the cold had jammed the mechanism. I rubbed my freezing hands together and tried again with all my might, but the key wouldn't even go in. My heart plummeted into my stomach. A wave of sheer panic washed over me. I rang the doorbell. For a few agonizing seconds, there was dead silence. Then I saw movement and light spilling through the large glass window of the living room. The door swung open. Standing in the doorway was Martha. She was draped in her most expensive silk clothes, a pearl necklace resting against her collarbone, and a sickeningly triumphant smirk plastered across her face, the look of a predator who had finally cornered and destroyed her lifelong rival. I peered past her shoulder into the living room, and the floor completely dropped out from beneath me. David was standing there. Right next to him was Sarah, a junior employee from his marketing firm I had met briefly at a couple of office Christmas parties. Sarah was wearing my expensive custom silk bathrobe, the one I had gifted myself for my birthday. She was sipping from my favorite crystal wine glass, looking around at the expensive furniture as if she were the lady of the manor. Martha glared at me with an icy, venomous cruelty I had never seen before. Her voice cracked like a whip. "There's no place for you in this house anymore, Emily. You were always so blind, so obsessed with your money, your contracts, and your work, that you never gave my son the love and respect he truly deserved. David finally found someone who genuinely loves him, respects him, and can give him a real family. This is their home now. Pick up your suitcase and get the hell off our property." David just stood there by the sofa, clutching Sarah's hand, too cowardly to even meet my gaze. He didn't try to stop his mother. He didn't offer a single word of explanation. He stood there like a spineless spectator, and his deafening silence hurt far more than Martha's vicious insults. Any normal woman probably would have lost her mind right then and there. She would have screamed, cried, and begged. She might have kicked the door, caused a scene for the neighbors, or grabbed David by the collar demanding answers. I did none of those things. Instead, an absolute glacial calm settled over me. It's the kind of peace that only comes when you finally realize that the person you thought was your family is nothing but a hollow, counterfeit shell. That beautiful house, which I had built brick by brick, suddenly felt completely alien to me. Instead of drowning in sorrow, my brain shifted into high gear. Without shedding a single tear or uttering a single word, I turned on my heel, grabbed my suitcase, and walked back out into the freezing rain. I checked into an ultra-exclusive, quiet hotel in downtown Seattle. Once in my room, I peeled off my soaked clothes and stared at myself in the massive bathroom mirror. When a woman's entire world shatters overnight, she usually breaks down. That night was the longest, darkest night of my life. I turned the shower on full blast and sobbed uncontrollably, letting the rushing water drown out the pathetic sound of my own heartbreak. I cried for the years I had wasted on a coward who never valued my worth. But the next morning, when the first crisp rays of sunlight pierced through my hotel window, the sorrow had evaporated. In its place was a cold, hyper-calculated rage. The ruthless businesswoman inside me had awakened, the one who operated strictly on hard facts, legal documents, and bulletproof strategies, completely unburdened by emotion. I weaponized my tears into the corporate savagery I had spent a decade mastering. Over the next few weeks, my phone blew up with taunting messages from Martha and David. Martha texted to brag that Sarah had changed the curtains in the master bedroom and was turning out to be a phenomenal cook. She gloated that the place finally felt like a home without my toxic presence. David sent a long, cowardly paragraph claiming he was sorry things ended so messily, but that he had finally found his true happiness. He arrogantly demanded I sign the divorce papers quietly and relinquish all claims to the house. They deliberately didn't block me. They wanted me to have a front row seat to their bliss. They wanted me to burn with jealousy and accept that I had been put in my place. I didn't reach out. I didn't argue. I didn't justify myself. Instead, I called my most trusted real estate broker and my property lawyer. I hosted them in the private lounge of my hotel and gave them a crystal-clear directive. Sell the house immediately, for cash, to a massive corporate rental conglomerate. I didn't waste a second. The legal paperwork was fast-tracked in absolute secrecy. David and Martha mistakenly believed that by changing the locks and physically occupying the space, the multi-million-dollar estate was suddenly theirs. They conveniently forgot one tiny, fatal detail. On paper, that property belonged entirely to the LLC I established before we ever got married. David's name was nowhere on the deed. He had zero equity, zero legal standing, and zero rights. In the eyes of the law, I was the sole, undisputed owner. They mistook my silence for submission. They assumed I would spiral into a deep depression and waste years bleeding money on divorce lawyers trying to fight for my share. They thought they could exhaust me into surrendering. But I didn't want the house anymore. They had completely contaminated it with their betrayal. I just wanted to show them exactly who they had decided to screw over. I wanted to decimate their reality without ever raising my voice. When I signed those final documents in the attorney's office, the sale became absolute. I walked away with a massive cash payout, 15% above market value, because the corporate firm was thrilled to secure such a prime, elite location. The property now belonged to a ruthless investment conglomerate. And if there is one thing corporate landlords excel at, it's legally and ruthlessly removing squatters. They don't care about sob stories, family drama, or tears. They care about liability and profit. Exactly 3 hours after closing the deal, I was lounging in my hotel suite, sipping a freshly brewed latte, when my phone screen lit up. After 27 days of radio silence, he was finally calling. I set my coffee cup down, took a deep breath, and answered. I didn't even need him to speak to know the trap had forcefully snapped shut. His voice was entirely stripped of the arrogant swagger he had paraded at the front door. He was trembling. In the background, I could hear the chaotic sounds of Martha violently sobbing, screaming at someone, and wailing in pure hysterics. David was hyperventilating, his words tumbling out in a panicked, begging stutter. He told me that heavily armed sheriffs and frighteningly stern corporate enforcers had just breached the property. They had slapped them with a non-negotiable 24-hour eviction notice for illegal trespassing. The officers informed them the property had been bought out by a conglomerate, and they were considered illegal squatters. He was practically crying as he begged, "Emily, for the love of God, what is happening? Did you really sell the house? How could you do this to us? Where are we supposed to go?" All our things are going to be thrown on the street. Our reputation is completely ruined. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the Seattle skyline. My voice was as cold and still as the winter air outside. You told me to get off your property and threw me out into the freezing rain, David. So, I gave the house to someone else. You can go start your new, beautiful life with your wonderful mother and your soulmate, Sarah, somewhere else. I don't care if you sleep on the street or under a bridge. Before he could sob out another pathetic word, I hung up the phone. I blocked his number, his mother's number, and wiped them out of my existence forever. A few months later, gossip filtered down from my old neighbors. They told me that David and Martha suffered the ultimate humiliation. The entire elite neighborhood watched from their porches as police officers stood by, forcing them to hastily shove their expensive belongings into cheap, rented U-Haul trucks. All their arrogance, their fake prestige, and their massive egos were utterly pulverized into the dirt that afternoon. And Sarah? Once she realized David was entirely penniless, that there was no luxury mansion, no fat bank accounts, and that he was essentially a homeless vagrant, she packed her bags and vanished within days. She was only ever there for the lavish lifestyle that I had paid for. Today, David and his mother live on the outskirts of the city in a cramped, damp rental apartment that barely sees the sun. Martha, the woman who dreamed of ruling a palace and treating me like the help, now spends her days washing dishes in a tiny, outdated kitchen, bitterly cursing her fate. As for me, I took my massive payout and bought a breathtaking, sun-drenched beach house miles away from Seattle's gloomy weather. I am living a new life, one that is peaceful, incredibly lucrative, and entirely free. No one will ever dictate my worth or clip my wings again. This entire nightmare taught me the most profound lesson of my life. The greatest victories aren't won by screaming, crying, or fighting in the mud. Sometimes your ultimate power lies in quietly signing your name on the dotted line and walking away, leaving your enemies to drown in the very trap their own greed and arrogance built. The most spectacular revenge is simply outclassing them and becoming so wildly successful that you never even have to look back in the rearview mirror. You don't need to get your hands dirty to destroy people who used you. You just need to make the right, calculated legal move at exactly the right time. No one can ever take what is rightfully yours unless you fall to your knees and surrender. I didn't surrender. I just rewrote the rules of the game. If you're still with me at the end of this journey, I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Drop the name of your city in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real, empowering, and deeply moving stories about navigating life's craziest curveballs, don't forget to subscribe to BookBite Studio and drop a like on this video. Let's keep exploring the beautiful, mysterious journey of life together.